guys. Okay, so before we start to learn your one length haircut, I'm going to go over a few reference points on the head and a couple things that you need to have an understanding of before you start cutting. So first of all, reference points. What does that mean? Reference points are the points on the head that signal from when the head goes from flat to round. So the first reference point we're going to do, or we're going to talk about, is the apex, which is the highest point of the head. When you're figuring out the highest point of the head, the best way to do this is to have your mannequin positioned really straight so that her head is level where it's supposed to be. Then you're going to place your comb on the top of the head so the comb is straight, and the point of the head that touches the comb is the highest point on the person's head or the mannequin's head. So this is your apex, okay? That is your highest point. The next thing we're going to learn is the parietal ridge. The parietal ridge is where the head starts to round, where it goes from flat at the top to round on the sides. The best way to figure this out is by placing your comb flat against the head here and flat against the head at the top. Where that triangle is, here on the side, is where the parietal ridge is, okay? It's this curve in the head. Same thing on this side, where it starts to round, that's the parietal ridge. Then you have your four corners. So if I were to place a comb on the head this way, and we made a corner at the front, here's one corner, here's two, and then we have 3 and 4 in the back. Again, if your comb was flat here and flat here on the side, that's another corner. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are your 4 corners. We also have the crown, which is this back area of the head, right here where your hand can go. So right past the apex, you have the apex here, and the crown is just behind it, pretty much the size of your hand. Then you have your bang area. So to figure out the bang area, you need to figure out where your front 2 corners are. So your comb is here and here. Here's a corner. And then your comb is here and here. Here's your second corner. And your bang area is going to make a triangular shape that goes to the apex. So you need to figure out your front 2 corners, figure out your apex, and it's going to be, let me get rid of one of these combs. It's going to be a triangular shape connecting those 3 spots. Your bang area should never go past the apex. This is not for all bangs, but this is called the bang area. It doesn't mean that you have to cut all of this hair for the bangs, but that is the area when you're referencing that. The next thing you have is your occipital bone. So this is in the back of the head. It's the bone that kind of protrudes out of the bottom of the skull here. In your mannequin, it's really hard to feel because they don't have bones like we do. So if you feel the back of your own head, you should feel a bone that kind of sticks out a little further than the rest and then starts to curve in down toward the bottom of your neck, and that is your occipital bone. Then past that, going down to the bottom hairline to the neck area, is your nape. So those are the spots of the head that you really want to pay attention to. So when I say to section the hair at the apex for a haircut, you know where it is. When I say to section the hair at the parietal ridge, you know where it is. Or take a section near the occipital bone. That's what we're talking about, okay? So those are our reference points. Now the other things we need to discuss are things like tension, distribution, cutting line, guide, and elevation. So first we're going to start with tension. So tension means how hard I'm pulling on the hair when I'm cutting it. So if I took this section of hair to cut it, and I got it really tight between my fingers and I was stretching it. That's how much tension I'm putting on the hair before I cut it. So when you're cutting someone's hair, you want to have even tension on all sections of the hair that you cut. So I can't take this one and comb it really smooth and pull it with tight tension and then cut, and then go to my neck section and just kind of loosely pick it up. I need to make sure that all points on my hair, on my haircut, are being pulled with the an even amount of tension. So that's what we talk about when we cut hair that way. Something to watch when you're cutting hair. You should never be cutting past your second knuckle. So that is not this first bend in your finger, but this second bend in your finger. There's a couple of reasons for this. One of them is if you cut past your second knuckle, you're more likely to cut yourself, and it's going to hurt up in this top part of your finger. So you should never be cutting past that second knuckle. Another reason for this is that when I pick the hair up and I am holding it in my fingers like this, if you put your fingers tight together, you'll notice that you have a little space right here past that second knuckle. But up here, I can't slide my comb in there. The tension from these two knuckles forward is the same. But once the hair gets in here, there's like a little space, so you're not going to be pulling the hair as tight. So if I pick all this hair up, and it goes from the tips of my fingers all the way down to my third knuckle, the hair that is past the second knuckle is in a really loose spot. It can be pulled through. But this hair is tighter. So there's even tension from your second knuckle forward, but not from your second knuckle to your third knuckle. Another thing we talk about is distribution. Distribution is how you're moving the hair around the head, where you're distributing it. So I'm distributing the hair straight down when I do this. I'm distributing the hair forward when I comb it like this. I'm distributing the hair to the side when I do this. So distribution is really just how you move the hair around the head. All right, the next thing is our cutting line. So our cutting line is which direction we're cutting the hair. So if I were to hold this hair straight up and cut it, I have a horizontal line, okay? If I angle my finger, I have a diagonal line. If I cut the hair and I slide down, I'm cutting a vertical line. So the line in which you're cutting the hair. You don't have to cut an entire haircut with the same cutting line, but that's for more advanced haircuts. So when we do our first one length haircut, everything is going to be a horizontal line. And then as we move forward with our haircuts and get into layers and angles and all that kind of stuff, we'll be changing up our cutting line. But you do want to be aware of those different things. So another term you need to know is your guide. So your guide is that first cut you make that you use to determine where all the rest of the hair is going to be cut to. So if I want her hair to be this length, then when I make a cut in the hair at this length, this piece that I cut first would be my guide. And I would match all the rest of the hair to that guide, okay? And when I get to the other side, it should be the same on both sides if I followed my guide correctly. Another term you need to know is elevation. Elevation can be really, really confusing and take a while to understand, and that's okay, but just getting a simple understanding of it at first is really important. So, elevation is how high you lift your hand when you're cutting. So, Zero elevation is when your hand is straight down at the bottom. You're not lifting your hand at all. So if we do a zero elevation haircut, which also is a one length haircut, and it's also called a hanging length haircut. What that means is that you are not lifting the hair up at all when you're cutting it. You're cutting it the way that it falls. You're hanging length. Where is the hair hanging? That's where you're cutting it. Hanging length, you're not lifting it, you're not elevating it. You're just cutting it at zero elevation where it naturally falls. As you start to move your hand up, you start to elevate your hand. We're not going to get into that whole ton right now, but just as a quick little reference, so we're down at the bottom, we have zero elevation. We lift the hair out to here, we're at 45-degree elevation. We've lifted the hair up 45 degrees. We come out, straight out here, we're at 90 degrees. We've elevated our hand 90 degrees. If I were to hold the hair straight up at the top, then we're at 180 degrees. So that's what we need to be aware of, where our hands are, how high it's elevated when we're cutting. So those are some things that you need to really remember. You can watch this video over and over until you understand it. And it's also in your Milady book to look up these references too. But really having a good understanding of this before we start cutting is really important. I hope that was helpful. And your next video will be on the actual one length haircut.